The E.P.C, or Experimental Plasma Charger, is perhaps one of the most commonly overlooked weapons in Deep Rock Galactic. Unfortunately, that also means it's an overlooked weapon in the gaming world in general. Its skill curve is high and it's a difficult weapon to get a feel for, but with the right build and some practice, you'll find it's one of the most powerful tools in the game and facilitates the potential for one of the most rewarding skill curves imaginable. Hey there, fellas. Today I'd like to talk about my favorite weapon of all time, out of any video game, the Experimental Plasma Charger. In this video I'll be going over my very favorite setup for the E.P.C and what I think makes this weapon so spectacular. But before I begin, I'd like to welcome you all to the channel. The channel has more than doubled in subscribers and I was absolutely shocked by all the new faces. So hello, I hope you enjoy the content to come. Alright, without further ado, let's sit back, relax, accidentally shoot your friend Steve, and enjoy the video. The E.P.C acts as an unlockable sidearm for the driller and may be quite tantalizing to the new player. In comparison to the Sabata, the E.P.C is remarkably different. While the Sabata is just your typical standard pistol, the E.P.C is a shiny piece of unique technology and no other class has anything even remotely similar to it. The weapon itself is practically begging you to try it out. The word experimental is in the name, for God's sake. It's really easy to be persuaded by your natural curiosity into doing the assignments and unlocking this weapon. It just so happens that the time spent doing those assignments gives you plenty of time to set up false expectations, a trap that many new players unfortunately fall into. Once players unlock their shiny new weapon, they use it a little bit, discover they have to lead their shots, find out that their projectiles are prone to lag a little bit if they aren't host, realize the charged shot perhaps is a little underwhelming. Essentially, they discover that perhaps it wasn't as amazing as they were hoping, and that's a little unfortunate. The first impression of this weapon tends to scare new users away. All this time, their original sidearm, the Sabata, was reliable and versatile, and the E.P.C really acts to highlight that observation in way of contrast. Sometimes you really don't know what you have until it's gone. What makes it worse is that when the player takes a look at the gear modification chart, it isn't immediately obvious that there's much they can do in order to change the weapon to their liking. This is because it's a weapon you probably don't need. You'll see what I mean in just a sec. In Deep Rock Galactic, you'll find that your starting weaponry is often disproportionately versatile in comparison to the unlockable alternatives, which themselves act to serve more niche and situational playstyles. Take a look at the Scout's M1000. An alternative to the assault rifle. While the assault rifle can excel against fodder and large targets alike, the M1000 makes fighting swarmers and standard grunts a total mishandling of time and resources, although it makes attacking high priority targets like acid spitters, praetorians, wardens, and menaces extremely rewarding, just because of the sheer efficiency it has when used to its strengths. Another example would be the Engineer's grenade launcher in Breach Cutter. The grenade launcher takes care of crowds of all types and can still be used against heavy targets to decent effectiveness. It has no obvious weakness. The Breach Cutter, on the other hand, doesn't dispatch crowds nearly as efficiently, but its strength against larger targets is far more ideal. You are rewarded for playing these unlockable weapons to their strengths, and punished if you don't. I bring this up because the E.P.C is no different. When unlocking a new weapon, part of the process of learning just how to use it means learning how not to use it. You're not going to be using the E.P.C the same way you use the Sabata. In certain situations, maybe you could and maybe you'd get away with it just fine, but if you wanted high single target damage with strong reliability, you may as well just stick to the Sabata. The E.P.C is weak when it comes to single target damage. I don't mean that its damage output is weak, but the limited range as well as the nature of shooting projectiles that you have to lead just act as additional obstacles that you have to overcome if you wish to use it that way. This is the E.P.C's weakness, but its weakness acts to contrast with its antithetical strength, crowd control. You see, the E.P.C's most defining feature is the charge shot. If you've ever played any of the Halo games and used a plasma pistol, this should feel a little more at home for you. You can rapidly shoot small projectiles if you so wish, but you can also charge a shot that explodes on contact. It's worth noting that due to this feature, you actually fire the weapon when you release the trigger, as opposed to firing the weapon the moment you pull it. Depending on your setup, this charge shot can have many different effects, all of which focus on damaging groups of enemies and dealing exponential damage to crowds. This is the main focus of the E.P.C, and would likely be the main reason you'd use it. This begs a question that you have to ask yourself: are you willing to give up your already small degree of versatility for more crowd control strength? The driller has many crowd control options. He has the flamethrower, the cryo cannon, and his satchel charge. His single target effectiveness leaves a lot to be desired as it is. The Sabata served to fill that role to a small degree, and you could build it to be a complete monster if you really wanted to. By using the E.P.C, you are limiting your already struggling versatility and reallocating more strength to a field that perhaps you're already strong in: crowd control. This reallocation really needs to be justified in order for the E.P.C to be used practically. If you really want to make the E.P.C work in your build while maintaining a sliver of versatility, I'd recommend doing what I do. Bring combat axes for single target damage for when you really need it, and having your drills do double damage helps a lot too. Now, why go through all this trouble to bring the E.P.C with you on missions? After all, there's lots of reasons not to bring it, that's for sure. It weakens you in plenty of ways, it's hard to use, it can lag if you aren't host. Why use it? Why use it? Well, because you can do this. You can blow chunks into the environment from range. You can mine gold in an instant. You can steal scouts' job if you're that evil. Those golden detonators usually take forever to mine, but not if you're using the E.P.C. You can level an area with great effectiveness, destroy plants, geysers, and volcanoes safely and efficiently, make environments less chaotic, and convince your teammates to turn their effects quality all the way down, because they're pretty much blind otherwise. The secret to this power is available to all players. No overclock required. It's a modification on the 5th tier called Thin Containment Field. What it does is enable the ability for the charged projectile to cause a large radial implosion if it comes into contact with any projectiles. This doesn't just mean your own. The charged shot can be detonated by teammates and enemies alike. This can make combat application tricky at times, especially if you're firing into a kill zone. Also, just forget about trying to take down wardens. 99% of the time, they'll just cause you to blow yourself up, so really don't even bother. Now, it's important to know a few things before you start making your build, assuming you're building the E.P.C to accommodate Thin Containment Field. There's a few modifications that don't benefit the upgrade at all. The detonated implosion deals different damage than the charged area damage category listed in the modification chart. That damage only affects the damage dealt when the charged shot makes contact with a surface. So, mods like A3 and B3 should be avoided if you're only trying to deal damage with implosions. The same goes for the area of effect modifiers. The modifications do not affect the size of the implosion, so that narrows things down quite a bit. For tier 1, you can choose between 5 extra damage or the extra ammo. I go for the extra ammo because when I'm trying to shoot my projectile, that extra damage is irrelevant. Plus, many times I'm not even trying to kill enemies when I'm using the weapon. For tier 2, if your focus is solely on Thin Containment Field, the only option available for you is increased projectile velocity. This mod might feel pretty at home for you, and it can definitely help you nail those implosions, but for me, it took a lot more practice trying to get used to this mod as opposed to just the default speed. Now, tier 3 is probably the most important choice you make. Fuel efficiency is very solid for if you plan on using the E.P.C a lot. If you run with max ammo, you can cause 24 implosions, and you get an additional 12 per resupply. This is opposed to without this mod, where you can only detonate 18 implosions and only get 9 per resupply. It's a pretty remarkable difference what saving 2 points of ammo can make in the long run. There's a really tantalizing option that competes with this one though: crystal capacitors. It almost triples the charge speed, making for a far more convenient and hasty charge, but I don't personally use this because the drawbacks of not picking the ammo efficiency are way too significant. Not to mention, there are overclocks available that can help your charge speed. As for tier 4, I highly recommend going with the ammo, as opposed to the reduced heat buildup. You can manage heat pretty easily moment to moment if you're using normal shots to begin with. Alright, as for the overclocks, there are only really 2 that will help you with the Thin Containment Field build in any meaningful way. There's the clean one, energy rerouting, that gives extra ammo and a faster charge rate. I recommend this one if you're going with the improved ammo efficiency on Tier 3. If you pair this overclock with the charge speed bonus, you'll be charging your weapon as fast as dwarvenly possible. My favorite overclock to go with the thin containment field though is the heat pipe, a balanced overclock. It reduces ammo consumption by charged shots by an additional 2 points, meaning when paired with all ammo modifiers and that charged shot ammo efficiency mod on Tier 3, you can maximally optimize your ammo efficiency and cause 33 implosions. That's a massive upgrade. Your charge speed is also buffed by an additional 30%, which is just 20% lower than what you would get with a clean overclock. This mod can serve as a replacement for the energy consumption mod on Tier 3 and open up the potential for the use of crystal capacitors, giving you the best of both worlds and causing you to have the default maximum ammo efficiency as well as the second best charge rate possible, all at the cost of normal shot heat generation. If you do decide to use this overclock, you may have some trouble with spamming normal shots, but an easy workaround for that is just paying attention to your heat. So now that you have an idea of how to build your E.P.C to accommodate the thin containment field mod, the only thing you're missing is practice, and you will definitely need it. That's the most important component to using this build, is weapon skill. What I mean is, you need to consider the distance of your target, the timing of both your charged projectile as well as the normal projectile, and the geometry of your target. Let's say you're trying to get some gold from a high-up wall. If you're facing the surface directly, then you need to be extremely precise with your timing. The hitbox on the charged projectile is deceptively larger than it appears to be, and seeing that you need to shoot the projectile before it touches the surface, but also not too far away from the surface, you may realize that the complications stack up a bit too much. The likelihood for error is far too large. It's for this reason that I recommend shooting parallel to the surface whenever possible. By doing this, you're far more likely to detonate in that Goldilocks zone. But while the weapon is extremely useful versus terrain, it doesn't fare so well against enemies. There's no way to increase the damage output of the Implosion, unfortunately, which means against larger targets like Praetorians, you're either going to have to eliminate them by some other means or suffer through the poor damage output. The Implosion does do fairly well against fodder though, so even on a full game of Hazard 5, it may be worth using against Mactera, grunts, and slashers, as it will eliminate them instantly. But against glyphid guards, you'll have to hit them twice, which perhaps isn't worth the ammo cost. Just remember to not aim directly at enemies, but just a little far away from them, so that you nail those shots more easily. Keep in mind, meticulous numbers, calculations, and intricate build choices aren't what makes this setup special. It's something a bit deeper. All you really need is that single mod, the thin containment field, to be launched onto a path that may end up yielding one of the most satisfying skill curves you've ever experienced in a first-person shooter. I know that's a bold claim, but I mean it. As you first start, you may be fumbling about trying to get a feel for the weapon, maybe embarrassing yourself a little bit, as I surely did. But when you start nailing those shots and actually mining things with your sidearm, a whole expanse of potential reveals itself to you, and that wave of dopamine is so sweet. Nailing those shots never gets old, and it makes you really appreciate the interaction between the weapon mechanics and the environmental mechanics. In the case of the E.P.C, they work so well for each other as it is, but it wouldn't feel nearly as nice if there wasn't some sort of skill involved. The game asks the player to put forth some sort of effort in the form of overcoming a quick challenge, and if the challenge is completed, the game rewards them in a perfectly natural way. So as the player gets better with the weapon, and the more often the player will successfully complete these micro challenges, the more rewarded that player is for overcoming the skill curve. This is just an additional aspect of this game that I really think is genius. The ability for a weapon to simultaneously have practical utility outside of combat is an invaluable ability, and it makes for an extremely enjoyable experience. In fact, whether it be a weapon or a tool is irrelevant in so much as it can be boiled down to a player ability. You see happenings like this in Just Cause with the grappling hook, Zelda with its Sheikah Slate, Dying Light with its parkour abilities, and Helldivers with its ordnance mechanic. All of these games are phenomenal, by the way, and I believe them to be that way because of these intricate, multi-purpose enhancements to player agency. In Deep Rock, this type of agency is meant to be divided amongst the 4 players. Every single dwarf has a tool that provides unique ways to traverse the caves. No one dwarf can have too much agency, or that would detract from the experience of the other players. And so balance is exercised. This is where an interesting discussion might be provoked. Is it possible that the driller has too much agency with this weapon? No other dwarf has a sidearm that has combat abilities and general utility, except maybe the engineer with his grenade launcher, but that utility doesn't extend beyond just grabbing red sugar off the ceiling. Although, the thin containment field setup doesn't have nearly the immediate combat ability that the grenade launcher does. It also has the potential to detract from the engineer-scout synergy, where NG sets up a platform for the scout to reach and mine the minerals. So, is it such a bad thing for the driller to have an ability such as this? Does the skill curve justify the power? I personally believe it does, although I do recognize the disparity between the weapons and other classes. The driller's whole role is heavy-duty excavation, and you're trading off so much of your combat versatility for the ability to excavate at range. And even then, that's only theoretically. You still have to land your shots, which is surprisingly difficult and extremely fun if you can manage it. The Thin Containment Field mod makes the E.P.C my favorite weapon out of any shooter game. It's a build that doesn't get better as you progress through an arbitrary upgrade system. Instead, it only gets better when you get better at using it. This is exactly what I love to see in weapons. You might suck with it at first, but the more you play with it, the better you'll be with it and the cooler things you'll be able to do with it. You develop a bond with it. Luckily, Deep Rock Galactic's weapon sandbox is full of these types of weapons for the most part, but perhaps the E.P.C shines as the brightest example. Alright, so thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video. Sorry if I sound a bit tired. I just finished editing this at 4 in the morning, so forgive me for that. If you found this video informative, entertaining, or valuable in any way, please do me the kindness of leaving a like and maybe a comment. You know, kind of nudging the algorithm in my favor and making it more likely for other people to see this content who might enjoy it. I want to thank everybody for leaving comments, constructive and positive, and all that stuff. I really appreciate it, especially the constructive comments. You know, you guys motivate me to do better, and I hope that this video displayed some sort of improvement. I definitely aimed pretty high with this video. It took me dozens of hours to edit. It was very ambitious. So thank you guys. It's been very fun making this video. Do let me know what you would like to see in the future. This has been Psychic Sploob, and peace out.